Welcome to the Hiragana Writing Guide Room. In here, I will be teaching you how to write each of the 46 Hiragana writing characters. Each week, we will focus on 2 columns. Each column usually has 5 characters. So you will have a total of 10 characters that you are required to learn how to write properly each week. I highly recommend that you practice writing these characters each day so that you memorize how they look and how to write them quickly. If you rush and do the writing practice assignment in, let's say, 10 minutes, submit it, you don't practice on your own, it will be very difficult to remember how to write these characters from memory. This will make the rest of your school year in my class a little more difficult. So, I highly suggest writing the characters as many times as you need to until you can write them from memory. For this week, I'll be teaching you how to write the A through O column and the Ka through Ko column. Here are the characters. A, I, U, E, O. Ka, Ki, Ku, Ke, Ko. Now for the characters Ka, Ki, Ku, Ke, Ko, there's actually something that you can add to each character and it'll change the sound of it slightly, but we'll go over that later. Okay, so this is your Hiragana writing guide for Hiragana A. When going over how to write each of the Hiragana, I'll be going over the proper stroke orders for each Hiragana. So some Hiragana, it only takes 2 strokes to write, some Hiragana, 3 strokes, some Hiragana, it only takes 1 stroke to write. So I'll go over the different number of strokes that you need. I'll go over them in order. And I will also, of course, teach you the correct way to write the Hiragana and the incorrect way to write the Hiragana as well, so that you can make sure that you don't make those mistakes. I'm sure this is the first time for a lot of you to be writing in Hiragana, so I don't expect you to be perfect at first, but over the course of the quarter or the semester, I hope that you can keep practicing and you'll get better. It'll start to be a lot easier to write. You'll be able to remember how to write it a lot easier, and the more you practice, the better it'll be. So throughout the years that I've been teaching how to write Hiragana to students, I noticed that students usually make the same type of mistakes when writing Hiragana, so I'll be going over those mistakes to help prevent it. Hiragana A. This character has 3 strokes. The first stroke. The first stroke is a little bit at an angle. Second stroke. Second stroke also has a sort of curve to it, so it is not straight down. Third stroke. So if you notice, this third stroke is pretty wide. It's a little bit wider than the first stroke on the top. A few points that you should keep in mind for Hiragana A is that this part here is crossing this area. Next, this part on the bottom is sticking out from this area. This line in the very end here does not curve or curl. And lastly, this area here is longer than the top area. So it's kind of like a cross, although it should be curved here. So this is Hiragana A. Okay, next I will be showing you the incorrect ways of writing Hiragana A so that you can avoid that. Okay, so do not write this way. So one of the incorrect ways is if you just write this going straight down instead of the curve that it should be. So even if you do this bottom part correctly, if this is straight down, this will be considered incorrect. Another way is if you do this part correctly where it's curved, but the bottom part here, the third stroke, if you make it really tiny and squished at the bottom, this will be considered incorrect. Another one similar to the second example, if you write the third stroke up here and this part here is really long, this will also be considered incorrect. Now the next few examples I wanted to show in regards to this last part of the third stroke. A few mistakes that I've seen is when students go a little overboard with the curve down here and it ends up being, it kind of curls up. This will of course be incorrect. On the opposite spectrum, if I see students writing the characters where the end does not end down here but it's actually up here, for example, it's all the way up here, so it doesn't actually come down here and curve like it should, this will also be considered incorrect. So when writing this curve correctly for this third stroke, this one's actually correct, it's just the second one that's not correct. But for this part here, if you notice, everything ends on the line here. So like if you have a line on your paper, this point ends here, this part touches here, and this curve here touches the line as well. So for this example, you notice that it doesn't touch all the way down here. Okay, so these are the incorrect ways of writing hiragana a. Make sure that you don't write it this way. So when you're practicing writing the hiragana characters, which is an assignment that I'll be giving you for all of the hiragana characters, if you see yourself writing the character like this, make sure to watch the video again to write it the correct way. Okay, next up we have hiragana I. For hiragana I, it kind of looks like a parentheses. So first stroke. So we have a curve here and a hook going up. Second stroke. So it's also a curve, and you notice they're both curving inwards, so it kind of is like a parentheses when you would write a word with a parentheses in an English sentence. Except if you notice, besides the hook down here, the second stroke is shorter than the right stroke. So if we have a line in your practice sheet or your loose leaf paper, the first stroke touches the line. The second stroke is hovering a little bit above the line. And this is how to write hiragana I. Okay, so now we will go over the incorrect ways of writing hiragana I. The first incorrect way is if you just write it where it looks like a parentheses. And first of all, you don't have the hook in the bottom. Second, if you notice, if there's a line on the bottom, both sides are touching the line, so they're both of equal length. So this would be considered incorrect. The next way, which I've seen some students do, is when they do the hook for the first stroke, they make it super intense. So the hook should not be this long. So even if you do the second part correctly, where it's hovering above the ground a bit, if the first part, the hook is really intense, this would be considered incorrect. When you look at the hiragana chart for some of these characters, for this character on the hiragana chart that I've given you, it's written pretty well. On the worksheets that I'll be giving you in the future, what I do is I type out the hiragana with my keyboard, so there's a slightly different way that the character is presented. Kind of like with the English alphabet, there's so many different fonts. Same thing with the hiragana when you type out the text on a keyboard versus when you write it. There are some simplified versions and there are some versions where it looks a little bit more like it's written with a calligraphy brush. Sometimes it can look a little bit like calligraphy and a little intense on the worksheets, but I'll be guiding you along the way when I can. Okay, so the third incorrect way to write hiragana I. So for this example, the left side is shorter than the right side. Now when you look at your hiragana chart, this actually looks like another character on the hiragana chart. It looks like a hiragana ri, the hiragana that's written with a R-I. So make sure that you don't make this mistake. Otherwise, I'll think that this is supposed to be the other hiragana and not actually a hiragana I. And I believe these are the usual mistakes that I see students do. Besides, if instead of a parentheses sort of look, you just write it, you write the hiragana very straight, this will of course be incorrect because it should have a curve on both sides. Alright, next we have hiragana, u. For hiragana, u, there are 2 strokes. You start with the top. The top should be at a slight slant, and then the second stroke. For the second stroke, you have a sort of curve here, and then it goes down. But it is not like a inverted letter C, because the bottom part stretches down here. So a few things about this character for hiragana u. First off, make sure that there is space in between the first stroke and the second stroke, and the slant should be facing down towards the right. For this character, imagine that there is a line going straight down the center of the character, and if you notice that the left side and the right side are pretty much equal to each other. So in the next part, I'll be teaching you the incorrect ways of writing this character. It's a pretty simple character, but it can also easily go wrong. Alright, so now I'm going to teach you the incorrect ways of writing hiragana u. First example. So in the correct way to write it, you have this large space on the left side. So this would be kind of the inverted version of it. So this would be considered wrong. Second example. If you write the top line as being kind of straight, this would be incorrect. Next example. If the first stroke is touching the second stroke, this will be incorrect. There must be space in between. In this example, you see that the top line is straight and the bottom kind of looks like a letter C, except it's just backwards. So this would be incorrect as well because the bottom for here should drag down a bit. So it should be more like this, where it's longer. And the top part should be slanted like this. So this would be okay. But this is incorrect. Next, we have hiragana, e. In Romaji, this character is written with an English letter E, but make sure that you don't pronounce it E, because E is a character that we went over earlier, which is written like this. So for this character, it has 2 strokes, even though it looks like it may have 3 strokes or more. So the first stroke. So first stroke can be at a little angle, going down to the right. Second stroke almost looks like a number 7 with a tail at the end. Okay, so here it is. For the first part, it goes up a bit, then it goes down, then you bring it up around halfway. So it's kind of like you're writing a letter H. And then at the bottom here, you must stop. Okay, so this is how to write hiragana, e. Make sure that you're not writing it like 1, 2, and then you just add this third one here. It must be 1, 2. Alright, next I'll be going over the incorrect ways of writing hiragana, e. So similar to hiragana, u, if your first stroke is touching the second stroke, this will be considered incorrect. And I'm not sure why you would make it vertical, but if you have a vertical line and then it's connected to the hiragana e in the bottom, this would be considered incorrect. A very common mistake that I see with my students is, so they write the second stroke and then when you're finishing it off, they will curl the ending here. It should not be curled. Okay, so hiragana e should be. Okay, so you have the first stroke, second stroke, you have the little H looking loop here, or little hill here, and it goes down and stops. It doesn't come up like this example here. Okay, so this would be incorrect. And the last example will be when the student tries to take the easy way out and writes the character like so. You'll have the first stroke, second stroke is just a number 7, and then they just add the third part to it. Next, we have hiragana, o. This is the final character for the a through o column. This character has 3 strokes. Okay, first stroke. So it's just a straight line. Second stroke. Make sure you pay close attention to the second stroke. Okay, so it goes straight down, but then it loops over to the left and up and over to the right side. The final third stroke is up here in the top. It is a horizontal line going down to the right. For this character, make sure that there is a big open space on the right side and a smaller one on the left side. Make sure this line here is at around the same level as this horizontal line and at the same area where this curve ends.